Freud was the prophet for the Victorian age of sexual suppression. Sullivan is the prophet for our age of unrelatedness, in which, beneath all the chatter of radio and newspapers and all the multitudes of contact, people are often strangers to each other. Rollo May. So who was Harry Stack Sullivan and why is he important? Sullivan was the founder of Interpersonal Psychiatry in America. According to him, healthy human development is based on a person's ability to establish intimacy with other human beings. Ironically, his own relationships were often not satisfying. As a child, he was lonely and physically isolated. As an adolescent, he suffered at least one schizophrenic episode. As an adult, most of the time he experienced superficial and ambivalent relationships. So he knew very well from personal experience, not just from abstract theorizing, what exactly happens to a person when they aren't able to connect with their fellow human beings. Hindered on a major level by his homosexuality, his career never took off. This may sound strange to us in 2020, but in early and mid-20th century America, homosexuality was considered a crime. There were laws in effect, called the sodomy laws, that tried to prohibit same-gender sex. Sullivan actually never came out of the closet, but it wasn't a well-kept secret either. Most people suspected him of being a homosexual. Nonetheless, in the end, Sullivan indirectly inspired and guided generations of new psychiatrists and therapists through his theories. His theories are ever more important in our current time to balance its uninhibited individualism and all the damage that it does to us. In Sullivan's theories, we can find wisdom and hope on how not to lose ourselves in a sea of individualism and narcissism with all its disastrous consequences. Sullivan, unlike Freud, saw human nature as intrinsically social and unproblematic. For Freud, humans are at their core antisocial, hyper-aggressive, and sexual creatures that need to tame their animal instincts to make civilization possible. Sullivan, on the other hand, saw human nature in a much more positive way. For Sullivan, fundamentally healthy human development with productive and satisfying relationships do not require taming and intensive socializing. He believed that we have simply evolved to be social creatures that can and want to be in healthy relationships. If we do find ourselves behaving in antisocial ways, the cause for this has to be found in the external world and not in our fundamentally antisocial nature, as Freud suggests. So why was Sullivan so positive about human nature? Let's find out. He talks about integrating tendencies as one of the cornerstones of human psychology. What does he mean by integrating tendencies? At face value, an interaction may seem to benefit one person while it doesn't benefit the other. But he argues that when analyzed further, most of the time, these interactions draw people together in mutually satisfying ways. A good example of this is a mother breastfeeding her baby. Let's say a baby is hungry and wants to be fed. The breasts of the lactating mother are full of milk and therefore cause unease, demanding relief. When the baby latches on, not only does she get fed, but she actively helps the mother to relieve the tension in her breasts. According to Sullivan, just like with breastfeeding, humans are intrinsically drawn to each other in mutually gratifying ways, even if at face value it may seem like one person gets benefit out of an interaction while the other doesn't. He argues, given a reasonable amount of patience, flexibility, and tact, various emotional, physical, and sexual needs can generate mutually satisfying opportunities for everybody involved. But you might ask yourself, if integrating tendencies create win-win situations by helping us to satisfy ourselves and others simultaneously, then why are human interactions so filled with dissatisfactions, conflicts, and clashes? To explain this, Sullivan turns to infants. According to Sullivan, infants experience fear and anxiety distinctively different. For example, if a loud noise occurs, if hunger is unaddressed, if tensions of any sort increase, the baby becomes afraid and cries. This fear serves as an integrating tendency since it motivates the mother to take action to relieve the baby of her tension. By taking action, the bond between mother and baby gets reinforced, thus satisfying both their needs for intimacy in addition to the baby's need for food. But on the other hand, anxiety, unlike fear, doesn't arise in the baby, but is picked up from others. This distinction for Sullivan was crucial. He believed that anxiety has no adaptive or productive function since it is experienced by the baby as tension with no focus, with no apparent cause. He further argued that anxiety doesn't work like an integrating tendency, like fear, because the baby cannot be rescued from anxiety, since the potential rescuer is the very person who has caused it in the first place. Let us now look at a good example to illustrate this process. Let's say the caregiver is worried about something totally unrelated to the baby. The baby picks up on the anxiety and demands relief. She cries in the same way she would cry for needs that fall under the category of integrating needs such as hunger or the need for intimacy. In such a situation, when the caregiver moves in to comfort the baby, she also automatically brings her own anxiety closer, thus increasing the baby's anxiety even more. With every effort at contact, the baby and the caregiver now get more anxious. Unless the caregiver can find a way to pull herself and the baby out of their anxious state, the baby will experience an ever-increasing amount of anxiety with no possible relief. You might ask yourself, how does the baby pick up anxiety from the mother in the first place? Sullivan, like many other psychologists, consider emotions to be contagious. For example, if somebody is peaceful, this will invoke peaceful feelings in others. If somebody is sad, this will invoke sadness in those who are in close proximity. For Sullivan, a baby is extra sensitive to the emotional state of the caregiver because of her natural dependency on the mother for care. If the caregiver is relaxed and comfortable, the baby can peacefully go back and forth between states of tension by arising needs like hunger and comfortable euphoria when our needs are met. But this natural process gets interrupted when anxiety gets introduced by the caregiver. Anxiety, unlike fear, will hinder the baby's needs for cuddling, being fed, and sleeping, and therefore, Sullivan considers it a disintegrating tendency. In adults, he compares anxiety to getting hit on the head. Sullivan argues that all things that come natural to us stop working or work only suboptimal when anxiety is present. He states that thinking, communicating, learning, sexual performance, intimacy, and so on all work suboptimal or stop working altogether under anxiety. For Sullivan, wanting to connect and establish intimacy with fellow human beings is as natural and necessary as the need to eat, drink, and sleep. He states that we're at our core social, and ideally, if it's up to us, if we could truly have it our way, we would want to satisfy and be satisfied simultaneously. But according to him, all of this goes out the window when anxiety gets introduced. Under anxiety, he argues that even the simplest of tasks, like eating, can be impaired, let alone complex social interactions or the need to live in harmony with fellow human beings. But what do the critics say about Sullivan? Sometimes he's criticized for studying human beings from a distance and blaming everything on nurture and environment, while neglecting the personal subjective experiences of the individual. However, Sullivan's emphasis was on studying the individual, but in his or her interpersonal world. He saw no point in focusing on internal psychic mechanisms like many in his time did, since he argued the internal psychic mechanisms inevitably take shape through interpersonal interactions anyway. He argued that the only way to understand a person's individual experiences, fantasies, and wishes is to place it in an interpersonal perspective. since it is through relationships with others we are able to formulate, maintain, and enjoy an inner life in the first place. Without others, these so-called private, intimate, subjective experiences would be severely disturbed, hampered, or not even possible. Not only did later attachment research back up Sullivan's claims on how important interconnectedness is, his work is also a breath of fresh air for our time, a time of uninhibited individualism that in turn breeds narcissism. For Sullivan, we have to connect with others. It isn't a matter of choice. If we don't, he thinks we're destined to become ill. This, of course, contrasts with the current thinking that puts more emphasis on individual growth and achievement instead of human connections. Even though Freud and Sullivan disagree about a lot of things, on one thing they do agree. We must begin to love in order not to fall ill. And we're bound to fall ill if we are unable to love. Sigmund Freud. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.